Foi até na fase. Exato. Muito perto. Então é esse entrevista.
Miss you. How are you guys?
I think your daughter is going to live me today.
She always likes. But yes.
Good that gives you high visibility. Because everybody wears like dark.
Quem conhece quem é daqui tem muito mais chance de saber opções, né? A gente não. Depende deles, né? Ou de outros amigos que estão conhecendo.
Welcome everyone, as I organize myself here. Just a reminder, right after our talk and our passes, we'll have a lunch here. We have 4, I think, different soups. So whoever wants to stay, please join us. We'll rearrange this area, put some tables, and then we'll share a meal together. So I realize that I'm the one standing between you and food. So please bear with me for an hour or so, and then we'll get some soup. And for our text today, just to start off, it is a text from the book The Way, the Truth, and the Life, Caminho, Verdade, Vida, from the Spirit Emmanuel. And it talks about a passage from the Gospel when Jesus says in John 13, he says, I give you a new commandment, love one another as I have loved you. And so Emmanuel brings to us a reflection about this one. He says, some tech issues today. He says, an attentive reading of the text would lead the reader to see these words of the Master as being identical to his teaching concerning the Golden Rule. However, there's a big difference. love your neighbor as yourself is different than love one another as I have loved you. The former, or the first one, entails a duty, and in fulfilling it, people should not expect the understanding of others. The disciple will love his or her neighbor as himself or herself. Jesus, however, broadens the formula to create a new commandment for the Christian community. The Master refers to this during his final intimate gathering with his dear friends. The commandment, "Love one another as I have loved you," assures a system of true solidarity among disciples. It warrants fraternal trust and the certainty of mutual understanding. In their everyday relationships, Christians are to love their neighbor as themselves, understanding, however, that in the home of their faith, they can count on brothers and sisters who actively support one another. This is the new commandment that has established true closeness among those who have given their lives to Christ. It means that in their area of toil, there are those who sacrifice themselves and those who appreciate the sacrifice, those who love and those who feel loved, those who do not, those who do the good, and those who know how to be thankful for it. In any circle of the gospel where these characteristics do not mark the way Christians relate to one another, the implications of the good news may have reached inquirers' minds, but they have not gained entrance to the sanctuary of their hearts. So let us join our hearts and our minds in a little prayer. Taking a deep breath, just so we arrive. Just so we can make ourselves present. And elevating our thoughts, our minds. Towards a level of mentors of Christ. Elevating our minds, our thoughts, our feelings to a place of serenity, to a place of peace, of comfort. Knowing that for the next hour, this is where we're supposed to be. And asking our guardian angels to help us open our hearts when we talk about love. Jesus as our master, our guide, the living example of love. We ask that you inspire all of us to listen, to think, to feel, and to contribute. So in this space we can learn, everyone together. And may we feel the sense of community in doing so, like the first Christians used to do almost 2,000 years ago, gathering together to talk about your teachings. May we feel your blessing. May we feel your love today and tomorrow. So be it. So be it. Bear with me a little bit. Technology is catching up to us. And today our topic is to talk about love. Specifically, one that we know there's a book that's missing here from from Kardec. It goes in right here in the middle. And it's called The Gospel According to Spiritism. And this book is where we have this passage when it says, Spiritists, love one another. So this is a great invitation to us all. And we'll talk quite a bit about this today. So, oh yeah, just to say where I'm bringing everything that we're talking about here today. There's a few books that we used, like The Gospel According to Spiritism, the Spirits book, Paul and Stephen, which is a book that I love to bring, and I highly, highly recommend everyone to read. And there's two tiny little books as well. This one is called Mediumship and Attunement, or Harmony, from Chico Xavier as well. It's a tiny, quick little book to read. And I love this tiny little one. Right, so cute.
It's very tiny.
Right, it's like a little pocket book. And it's called Christian Agenda by Andrea Luis. And it's an amazing book as well. I realized I
There
booked
are
them.
bigger sizes, guys.
There are bigger sizes, yeah.
If you want it.
But it's really cute. Very easy to travel with. And its size is has nothing to do with the how deep and how purposeful the content is. And obviously some letters of Paul. So lots to talk about today. And starting with a question, and hopefully we can all contribute and talk together. The first question I had is, where's God's love? Where we might see it, where we might feel it. And this comes from a talk by Haroldo Dutra Dias. He's a spiritist in Brazil, and he talks about this, so I listened to it yesterday. Where do you guys think God's love is? Any
Maybe
thoughts?
Everywhere. Inside of us and everywhere, I would say.
Maybe the better question is, where isn't it?
Yeah.
Exactly. Good. So we know that God's love is truly everywhere, right? His creation is everywhere. Even where we can't see, even where we can't feel, God is there. There is a concept from Spiritism that talks about the universal fluid that gives rise to everything material. And that is something that God created. And one of the characteristics of it is that it is in everything. It is everywhere. So the idea that God's love is everywhere kind of helps us realize that even though at times we might feel alone, knowing that God's love is everywhere, literally, it helps us realize that we're truly never alone. Even though we might feel it that way, having the notion and the thought that truly we're never alone. There's always God's love there to help us. And if not just God's love, but also our guardian angels, which is one of the examples of God's love that He has gifted us in this lifetime. And the other question that I have to you, maybe this might engage a little bit more, is whether or not we deserve God's love. Do we deserve it? Are we worthy? A gente merece o amor de Deus.
I think there's nothing about deserving. Like, it's unconditional love. So even if you don't, you get it anyway.
Thank you, Drew. Again, we talked about overnight, I guess. That's exactly it.
And another thing is just because we assume, we ask this ourselves, like, oh, I do not deserve God's love because we commit mistakes, but He knows that we're going to commit mistakes. So, as Ju said, it's unconditional because He knows the path we're going through and all the mistakes we're going to do. So regardless of that, He loves us.
Exactly. Because as you both said, if God only loves us if we do something, we're making his love then conditional, right? Not only that, something else that Adolfo brought to us, which is very interesting, is if we think about the idea of, let's say God's love, that we deserve or we don't deserve God's love depending on what we do. If we say that, right? And so if we say that I deserve God's love because I helped someone, if God's love is conditional to what we do, in turn it means that we are controlling God's love. Because it's dependent on our actions. And that wouldn't make any sense. Right? Because it's not our love, it's his love, and he gives this to everyone, regardless of what they do. So that's a logical, I guess, explanation that you can go through your mind to prove to yourself that we all have God's love. It's not something that we deserve or not deserve, but it's something that we simply have it, regardless.
Sometimes it feels like existence
Mhm.
is love.
Mm-hmm.
And loves us at such a deep level that so many circumstances fall on a specific path
Mm-hmm.
just for you to exist and have to share that with humans. And it is abundant love the whole
Mhm.
time.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So many things have to fall into place for one life to exist. We actually studied this on Monday quite a bit. That it couldn't help. It wouldn't happen if it weren't for love, right? Thank you. And Kardec asks something like this in this book, the Spirit's book, question 126. He's asking about the merit of God's love when he asks, having reached the supreme degree of perfection, do the spirits who walked the path of evil have, in the eyes of God, less merit than the others? So, do spirits that are still practicing evil and spirits that, let's say, are angels, like some very superior spirits, do they deserve God's love in the same way?
Yes.
Exactly. That's the answer that the spirits give. They say God looks in the same way upon those who went astray meaning aqueles que desviaram, do caminho, and upon the others, so it doesn't matter who they are. And he loves them all with the same heart, right? So we can see that there's no division, there's no preference from God's love. It just exists. It just is.
It just made me remember two laws, like the law of justice
Mm-hmm.
and law of mercy.
Mm-hmm.
So it wouldn't make sense to God not makes any difference.
Mm-hmm. How would it be just?
Yeah.
Right?
It
That he would love
yeah.
some but not others.
And it's,
Yeah.
and it's interesting because it's the hardest part for us.
Mm-hmm.
We're so quick to judge someone, and it is just because we're attached to this one existence.
Mm-hmm.
The time as we go, we don't know who we were in the
Mhm.
past, or what led us to do the things we did. In the same way that you don't want people to judge you and actually to understand you, we're the easiest ones to just judge.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Thank you. We'll talk more about that. Thanks for bringing that up. And there's a book that I haven't mentioned actually, but it's called Thought and Life. Louis loves that book. He always brings talks from that book. And it's a very practical book, very easy, quick chapters. And because it's practical because it talks about very specific things of our lives. So it will talk about, I'm drawing a blank here, but it talks about a lot of things. It talks about charity, it talks about obsession, it talks about jealousy, it talks about sadness, and then it ends talking about love. The last text of that book is to talk about love. Because in a way, if we were to think about if we were to ask ourselves what is love, right? What does it mean to love someone? Actually, that's the question. What? I'll ask the question now. What do you guys think it's to love someone?
Act of service.
Acts of service, yes.
Acceptance. You accept the other person.
Accepting others, yes.
I think it's conditional too, right?
Mhm.
Like it's kind of acceptance, but like you're not expecting anything. You just love that person, like
Mm-hmm.
it's genuine.
Yes. We also think about, respecting one another, and so many other descriptions that you can give to love. And the interesting part is everything that you said, everything that you described, those are all virtues. So when we're patient with someone, right, we're practicing the virtue of patience, and that is also an act of love. Practicing the virtue of humility, that's an act of love, of respect, acts of services, of charity, and so on and so forth. So that's the beauty of love, because love is what we call it, the overarching virtue. That any virtue that you're practicing, you are in turn practicing love as well. That's why when we describe love, a way to describe love, any virtue that you say could be a description or a characteristic of love. And and in that book, going back to the book, Emmanuel brings to us a very similar reflection. He says that the worm, or the minyoka, is loved by Lord the same way as the angel is, because there is no difference in the eyes of God, because he sees the person today, the spirit today, but he can also have the complete notion of what the future entails as well. So he doesn't see it today necessarily, but he sees the potential in that spirit, becoming a superior spirit. The same way that we can think about parents and kids when they go, to school, perhaps the very first day, the parent is already thinking about, right now he's in kindergarten, but the parent's already picturing their minds them going to junior high school, university, having kids. The parent, as God, as an example, right, is already projecting all the future based on knowing the potential of your offspring. And so this idea then, let's bring ourselves back to the idea that, God loves us. We're worthy of God's love, regardless of what we do. And why is this something sometimes very hard for us to feel? A lot of us can understand it. It's quite easy, like we just explained. It's quite easy to understand it, but sometimes to feel worthy of God's love is something a little trickier to do. And there are many reasons for it. One of them being the fact that the majority of us, if not all of us, have lived in the past, or have lived in communities that would tell us that God is out there to punish us if we do something wrong, but if we do something good, then we're making God happy, right? So we were taught a lot of times, even to this day, we might be being taught the fact that I have to do something good to deserve God's love. If I don't do something good, then God will punish me. Right? So we were taught a lot of times in the past this idea that God's love is transactional. So we have that in us, right? The majority of us have that in us. So even though we might know that God's love is unconditional, perhaps we still don't feel it. So I wanted you all to, if you want, you can close your eyes just a couple seconds, but I wanted us all to tell ourselves, to say the sentence, that God loves me, and say that sentence to us, and stay with that, for a couple seconds. Just to feel. Just say that sentence to yourself and feel it, and trust it. Deus me ama, ou eu mereço o amor de Deus, or God loves me the way I am today. So we can, start to hopefully feel it and start to break those barriers that we might have. Maybe some voices saying that we are not worthy of love, that we can start to change that slowly within ourselves.
Just one
Yes.
comment about that, because it's when you said it's tricky, right? I guess the essence of being tricky, it's because since we're not evolved yet to understand what God is, then it's trickier for us to understand how unconditional God's love is, because and we also don't understand exactly God itself, right? So it's another layer
Yes.
of complexity, I would
Yes.
say.
Yeah.
But it's also an opportunity for us to understand it's our path, because once we are more evolved, it's going to be closer and closer for us to understand what God is, and then other things that comes with it.
Exactly.
Sometimes I feel like everything is noise. If you calm everything and you're actually present, you feel God's love.
Yeah.
But then you have noises in your head about different thoughts you have, or stressed about something, you think about an agenda on something, or even questioning, do I even love? If you just calm your mind and you actually be present, you feel God.
That's true.
Yeah.
Absolutely, because it's an inside exercise,
Yes.
right? It's ignore everything outside and
Yeah.
be with yourself.
But I think it's for us, it's like as humans, we do have love as conditional as well. So it's hard to understand God's love. Like, how is that possible? Because for us, for many of us, it's not something that we fully understand, I guess.
But that's the
It's not doable.
meditation.
Yeah, yeah.
When I closed my eyes, I was thinking, like, the thing that came to my mind was one of those bumper stickers
Yeah.
that says, like, I don't own the world, but I am the child. I am not the world's owner, but I am the child. So, eu não sou o dono do mundo, mas sou o filho do dono. So when you think about that, it's like, how awesome are we, right?
Yeah.
Like, so when I think about love, it's also about self-love. Like, God loves you regardless, but are you doing that? Are you accepting your flaws? Are you pushing yourself too hard, or are you judging yourself? Because it comes, most of the time it comes from us.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like, and that thought just make me think, like, or go back to, yes, I'm great, but I'm great in a sense of humbleness and not pride.
Yes. Thank you.
Sorry, I was just gonna say that sometimes I think personally that to deserve God's love, I should be perfect. It's kind of connected to. It's a conditional love. Like you said, it's a conditional love when it's not.
Yeah.
It's just something we create in our mind.
I was just thinking that I was lucky because I didn't grow up like going to any religion specifically, so I didn't had, when you said, yeah, God loves all of us and are you deserving of God, it wasn't a question that I ever imposed to myself, because I never taught God as like a judge or that he would punish me. But then when you talked about self-love, I was like, oh yeah, if I know that God loves me,
Why don't I love myself?
why don't I love myself?
If he really loved me, would I have all those flaws? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Wow. Come on.
And I guess since you guys are taking the conversation to that side, I'll bring a slide that I wasn't going to talk about, but this one is, I don't have the book here, but Joana de Angelis, who wrote, the spirit who wrote a lot of books through Givaldo Pereira Franco, she wrote a book called Love, Unbeatable Love, where she explains a lot about love. And she talks about the phases of love, which I think kind of helps us place or understand why we do, or why we think of love the way we think of love. And she likes to say that she brings an analogy as how mature our love is compared to a child, a teenager, or an adult, just to make it easier to understand. She says that in the beginning, as we start, to evolve, our love's still very possessive, and it's very characteristic to what a child or a baby is, right? The baby will cry and demand milk or demand to be changed, regardless of what's happening to the mom. He doesn't care if the mom is asleep or if the mom is in the washroom. He doesn't ask, right? It's that moment, it's that level that is completely possessive and very needy, right? It only wants to receive. That is, as we start to develop love, it's very possessive. As we start to evolve a little bit, we're reaching adolescence then, and sorry, again, this is not to say that as a child, that's my type of love. As an adolescent, this is my type of love. And as an adult, this is where I am. I just don't want to confuse that. We're talking about the phases of love. So as I start to develop my love, it's then expressed through insecurity, which is something that we see in adolescence. And it's very conditional. So this is what you were talking about before. It's very transactional. Right? So I will give love if I receive, right? And that's where likely most of us are still, because we must receive something in return, right? Something very transactional. As we start again to develop and mature our love, then we reach the path, or we reach a stage where we become the peacemakers, where we give unconditionally, right? When we're not putting conditions to love. And this is not God's love, but now I'm talking about our love, because God's love is right. It's already here. It's beyond this. it's already there. But our love towards ourselves and towards others, that's how Joanna describes that it evolves, that it matures. And I wanted to bring this because you guys brought the idea of self-love, right? So how many of us are able to love ourselves unconditionally, right? When we see perhaps a little trait that we don't like about ourselves, or when we feel jealousy, for example. Well, if you feel jealousy, we know we're not here, we're over there, right? And so on and so forth.
I was joking that it's like junior, pleno, senior.
Yes.
And it feels like it's not good for business. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's not good for business if you just love everyone and you love yourself. You don't buy the cream. It is very hard sometimes.
Yeah.
To choose to love.
To choose to love. Yeah, exactly.
Maybe that's the message, though, is that as you're sharing here, Victor,
Mm-hmm.
as you said, God's love is so much greater. But as we develop and learn the capacity to love, we better align ourselves with the love that God always already had, and even greater than that.
Yeah.
And to Drew's point, the idea of us being great. We are great not because of anything to do with ourselves, because we are the function of something so much greater.
Mm-hmm.
And that is what provides any sort of basis for greatness here, rather than anything in relation to ourselves. And this greatness loves us just as it is.
Yeah. If him being the one who knows it all, if he loves us, then who are we to say to question it, right? Or to doubt him, right?
Yeah.
Perfect. So again, this one is the title of the talk, and it's the first in the book, The Gospel According to Spiritism. This is written by the Spirit of Truth, and the more we study about the Spirit of Truth, the more we compare about what's in the Gospel and what's in the Gospel according to Spiritism, you can draw some conclusions that the Spirit of Truth is Jesus. And in this text he said, Spiritists, love one another. This is the first teaching. So that was the first teaching or guidance that he came to give us. Do you guys remember the second one? He gives us two. He says, Spiritists, love one another. This is the first teaching. And it says another sentence right after. Those are the two pillars, I guess, of Spiritism. He says, love one another. This is the first. And the second is to learn, to study, to instruir-vos. That's the second one. Right? So, Spiritas, né? Ame uns aos outros. Esse é o primeiro ensinamento. E o segundo é instruir-vos. And that's why we read the very text in the beginning, because that is also part of what Jesus says. It's one of the greatest commandments, if you will, right? It's to love one another as yourself, is to love God, or like we saw, to love one another as I have loved you, as Jesus says in John. So we can see that, loving one another is not only the greatest commandment for others, but for us, right? When we love one another, when we have these acts of love, the first beneficiary of that is ourselves, right? So it's in our best interest. And again, some of you said something about love already being there, and we kind of put barriers to it. And to that effect, I want to bring a passage from a Persian poet called Rumi. He lived in the 1600s, I believe. Yeah, you probably remember this already, yeah. So he says that when he's talking about love, he says that your task is not to seek love, but merely to seek and find all the barriers within yourself that you have built against it. Another way to think about this is think about a sculpture, uma escultura. And there's a famous quote attributed to Rodin, who was a sculptor. He was asked, and he created that famous sculpture. It's called The Thinker, with the guys like this. And he was asked, how did you come up with this, right? And then he said, well, that sculpture was always there. All I did was trim the edges, right? Which is the same idea about this. The love is already within us because we were created by God. We were created in similitude to God. We are similar to God in that way. So we are all love already, but we still have to trim the edges to make it shine, right? All these barriers that we put to love that prevents us from fully loving ourselves and loving others. There are many of them. I'm not going to spend too much time talking about all of them, but we can think about vanity being one of them, pride, selfishness, all these feelings, all these egoic feelings that we have that prevents us. Sometimes we might think, well, that person doesn't deserve my love because they betrayed me or they did something to me, right? So again, we're putting a condition there to love. So if we trim that vanity, if we trim that pride, then we can more easily love.
It goes back to, I think, something that Luis said a couple weeks ago when he was reading the harmonization text about dead points. And I think it came from another text certainly, but the idea of, we create the gap, the emptiness, or the absence of love, even though it's not really absent, but the idea or the belief that there's an absence of love there, when in reality there never was and there never will be. It's just if we choose to separate ourselves from it.
And sometimes what I feel is, you love someone, and then the person has an argument or bickering with you, and you feel so hurt by that you just carry the pain-ish. But then sometimes I just have to think like, I'm also human. Sometimes I'm not the best person to talk to someone else too. Even my horse gets me wrong sometimes. You know, like, it is not because you don't love. There's just so much happening that sometimes you don't have the energy to give all of it. And then it's kind of, they're also in a journey. They're also learning. I also don't know everything. And I try to practice about my mom. You know, it's like those more, the closest relationships is like the ones that we carry these scars the most. And it's so easy to look at the scar, but not see the love that caused that scar for some reason.
Absolutely. That's a very good thing that you said, and we'll talk a little bit about that actually. André Luis, in this tiny little book, right? He says, in every earthly creature, there's light and shadow. So, to your point, highlight your nobility so that the nobility of others may come to you. Right? So, if we start to try and see the good in people, understanding that yes, they have some shadows, but yes, they also have some light, where is our focus? Right? And as we focus more on the love, as we focus more on the nobility, as a result, the nobility of others may also come to us. And who wouldn't want that?
Maybe not only may, but certainly will.
Certainly will, yes.
You realize how exhausting it can be to be angry, especially at someone that's just constantly nice to you.
That's true.
At some point, you just are like, you just throw your arms up and give up, maybe out of frustration, but the end result is the same because it's just more energy to keep being mad than just be nice to someone that's always nice to you, you know?
Because that's the natural way.
Yeah.
Right? The natural way is to love.
Yeah.
And like I said, like I talked about Paul and Stephen, Paul Esteban, this book that I highly recommend to everyone. It's my favorite Spiritist book. And we're going to talk about a passage from this book that highlights that specific case about the ability to see the good in people. So I don't know how many of you know the story, but you have Paul of Tarsus, who was a tyrant. Summarize it that way. He was a tyrant. And Stephen, who was a very devoted Christian. And he would feel the teachings of Christ because he had, people will look at him and feel the peace that he had and feel the love that he had. That was Stephen. And then there's Abigail, who was Stephen's sister and Paul's fiancée. But they didn't know about that. And so Paul, at one point, comes across Stephen and becomes very jealous of him because Stephen had peace. He didn't have anything else. Right? He was preaching at the church, and that's where Paul saw him, and he realized Stephen didn't have anything, didn't have any material possessions, yet he was a very peaceful man. And Paul got very angry and very jealous because Paul had literally everything at the time, but he was lacking that peace that Stephen had. So he became very fascinated, and to the point that he was persecuting and chasing all the Christians and killing them because he wanted to kill all Christianity. This was Paul. And then Paul at one point found Stephen and ordered his death. So Stephen was put in the square, and then people were stoning Stephen to kill him. And Abigail, Paul's fiancée, was there, and then she saw it from afar, and she realized, well, wait, that's my brother, Paul. What are you doing to him? And that's when Paul first learned that Stephen was Abigail's brother. And so when Abigail said, that's my brother, so then Paul's like, whoa, okay, let's get him back, right? Let's stop. But it was a little too late, right? Stephen was already very hurt. And so he brought him inside. He was lying on a little bench, and then Abigail was kind of sitting on the bench with Stephen lying right next to her, still with some breath, so he was still talking. And then eventually Paul comes into the room, and there you have it. So you have Stephen lying down, his sister, and then the man who ordered Stephen's death, Paul, just came into the room. And then it's a conversation between Stephen and Abigail that Jules remembers a lot as well. Stephen, when he sees Paul, instead of, cursing him, because he was the person responsible for having him stoned, he says, "May Christ bless you." He says that to Paul. And to Abigail, he says, "I do not have an enemy in your fiancé. I have a brother. Saul, or Paul, must be good and generous." So here's the ability of seeing the good in people, seeing beyond the mistakes that he made. He said he defended Moses until the end. He was a tyrant because Paul was defending Moses' laws. And then he ends with a famous sentence: "Imagine what he will do when he meets Christ." And that truly happened. When Paul met Christ, he became, if not the most famous, but one of the most famous apostles of Christ. Right? Even though he didn't live with Christ, he became one of the most famous. Yes?
One time,
Mhm.
I used to go to a spirit center in São Paulo, and I will never forget what one guy said once. It was, imagine that life is a theater, and someone needs to play the part that throws the stone. Imagine how hard you feel knowing when you're born that you chose to be the one that would throw the stone in that older spirit. Imagine that you chose to play the part for that person to have a reaction that they need to have because of the big plan of God. And then I was like, I love each person that crossed my path because I learned I could have hated you. But you came for a reason. And it feels very interesting when I think like that forever changed the way I see people.
Good. Yeah, it's always a choice to stone or not to stone. We also always have a choice, right? We always have a choice to love. And Stephen had a choice here, right? And he chose love. He chose to see the good in Stephen and in Paul. And then again in this little tiny book, right, along the same lines, André Luiz says, "It is always easy to observe the evil and identify it." Isn't it? It's very easy to see the flaws in others, to see the flaws in ourselves. It's very easy. However, what Christ expects from us is the discovery and cultivation of good, so that the divine love may be glorified. So even though it might be the easiest thing to observe the flaws and what people are doing wrong, why not focus on what they're doing right? Right? And if we can't see it, let's say we can't, we try, but that person who just can't see anything that they do that is good, we can only see evil. We can still remind ourselves that God loves them. So there must be a reason. There must be something good in them. We just can't see it. And that's because we can't see it. Doesn't mean that they don't have it. Right? So it's something. It's some lacking on our part from detecting the good that the person has. Right? And we talked about this on Monday. A couple Mondays ago, and it's a passage from, not a passage, sorry. It's something that an American priest, his name is Gregory Boyle, again, I've already brought this sentence quite a few times, but I love it. Because it talks about this. And Gregory Boyle, again, he was a priest in the United States. He lived in East LA, which is one of the rougher parts of LA. And his job, what he created there, was a community to rehabilitate people back into society. More often with people that left prison, regardless of age, could have been youth or adults. But his community of service there was to rehabilitate those people back into society. Right? What can we do to bring them back and to have a life back in society after leaving prison? And so he wrote a few books, and he had many examples, right? And he learned a lot from dealing with all that. And it was really beautiful what he said, because through his experiences, he said something like, it would seem that quite possibly the ultimate measure of health in any community might well reside in our ability to stand in awe at what folks have to carry, rather than in judgment at how they carry it. So in Portuguese, I'll give it a go. É bastante possível que a medida maior, né, da saúde numa comunidade pode ser no fato da nossa habilidade em apreciar o que as pessoas têm que carregar, ao invés de julgar como elas carregam. So that removes the judgment and puts us in a place of awe, in a place of finding the love, finding the good in other people.
It's the same thing as, like, if you change the question from what's wrong with you to what happened to you, your whole perspective changes.
Exactly.
Because then you're not looking at the flaws or whatever it is that is not quite right, but what made this person be doing here.
This reminds me, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Of something, actually building off of your point. I'm sorry, I haven't had the pleasure of meeting you personally, but maybe today afterwards.
There you go. Sounds like it.
Yeah. But in any of what I was going to say was this idea of just, you know, the roles that we play and how we participate in life. And a quote that has always impacted me actually comes from Mr. Rogers, and I can appreciate how people here might not know Mr. Rogers. Most of you are Brazilian, but he's a TV host, a children's TV host from the 70s, but very, very famous. So like an entire generation of kids would have grown up watching him. And he used to carry a post-it note in his pocket, and it only had a couple lines on it, and it read, "You couldn't help but love every single person that you would ever meet if you only really understood their story when meeting them." And what I would add to that, and it kind of very much builds off of this quote that you just shared, Victor, is that, and if you don't love them even once you know their story, it's probably just because you don't know enough of it yet.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's so true.
Yeah, and it ever when I read that, it was one of these epiphany moments in life that, you know, you just as if that everybody has something that they're carrying that is really astonishing if you really appreciated what it is that they're managing in their own life experience.
Exactly.
And that's where I'm going to say, puxar a sardinha pro nosso lado. Brazilians, if you're not feeling well that day, you're going to tell people. If you're not feeling well that day, that happened and that's what's happening to you, put it out. We're very real, let's say it like that. And I just came from Brazil Thursday, so that's why.
You're fresh.
Okay, it was Carnival, and then it is just you have 10,000 problems, and you know that if you open up a little bit to that human beside you, they're gonna just see like, oh shit. By the way, do you want more meat? You know what I mean? They're gonna let you feel that. They're gonna encourage you to share with them, but they're not going to be like, oh, so what you gonna do now? Are you gonna punch them? No, it's like they open up for you to be yourself, to share, to feel in a community that everyone, because they share what they are carrying on happiness, it just feels lighter for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think
Beautiful.
that's exactly what we see here, right? It's the health of a community. So you're describing a healthy community. And that's why we read in the beginning when Jesus said, love one another as I have loved you. Emmanuel says this, the reason why Jesus said, love one another as I have loved you, is because it assures a system of true solidarity among disciples. It warrants fraternal trust and the certainty of mutual understanding.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Isn't that what a community truly is? And where are we from here? I have 4 minutes. I'm just thinking. Well, since we talked about Paul, again, right, remembering that he was a tyrant that was ordering people to be killed, and then he met Jesus, and then he did a lot, to the point that he wrote a letter to the Corinthians, and this is a very famous letter, Corinthians 13, first letter, which is kind of like a poem about love. And
Whoever likes Legião Urbana,
There you go.
Monte Castelo.
So there are very, and I'm not going to spend too much time here, but descriptions of love to see how love makes our lives a lot easier. Right? Imagine a life where we're patient, where we're kind, where we're not jealous, where we're not proud. It would, right? It's not. It would be different. It will be easier because we will get there. Right? I'm sure we can look into the past and look at now. We can probably see already a progress as far as the ability of us to love, to be patient. He says love is not rude, it's not selfish, it does not get upset with others. He doesn't count up wrongs that have been done. I think you talked about that before. Right? He doesn't keep a tab of everything that was done wrong. Right? Can you imagine a mom if they kept a tab of everything that the kid did?
Oh, my mom.
Poor mom.
So and that doesn't lead to a healthy relationship, right? Because love always gives, right? It doesn't ask for anything in return. Love takes no pleasure in evil, but rejoices over the truth. Love patiently accepts all things. It always trusts, it always hopes, and always endures. So I can't make love more appealing for us to practice, right? Because I'm sure all of us want something like this. And yeah, that's perfect. That was the next slide. Where do we start? Where do we start? Right? Where do we start? And it starts with us, right? You can't give something we don't have. So it always starts with us. And again, bringing Paul back, again from this book, it's very beautiful to see that when he met Christ, he was traveling to Damascus, and he fell off this horse and then met Christ, and he went blind. And then one of the reflections that we can have, why did he go blind after meeting up with Jesus? Why do you think he went blind? So he learned, a lot from Jesus in that encounter that he had with him, and then he goes blind.
Because it was an invitation to look on inside of him.
Because it starts there.
It's kind of that feeling that when you meet God, is so much love that nothing else around you even matters anymore. You can just disconnect with everything and choose to feel that love. So you go blind for everything around you. There's just love.
Yeah, it's exactly. An invitation for him to apply everything that he learned from Jesus to himself first,
Mm-hmm.
right? And after he did that, then he was ready to go and become the apostle that traveled the most and helped, you know, the most. But it started with him first, right? And that's all, because I guess we're at time. So I just wanted to end with what Jesus taught us, right? To love one another as I have loved you. So thank you all for the comments, the reflections. It was really good. And I'm going to end with a prayer from Sheikh Xavier, translated to English. And the prayer is actually from Emmanuel, and it is called, just trying to find it here. It's called Our Prayer. This is not Our Father, not Pai Nosso, but it's Our Prayer. Nossa, oração nossa. Very well. Let us close our eyes. And just feel God's love for us. It's already around us. Let us feel it. Feel loved today. And as we talked about how we're already loved, and we just need to shave a few edges to allow love to blossom. We'll invite the words of Emmanuel. And he told us, Lord, teach us to pray without forgetting our work, to give without looking at whom, to serve without asking for how long, to suffer without hurting anyone, to progress without losing simplicity, to sow good without thinking about results, to forgive without conditions, to march forward without counting obstacles, to see without malice, to listen without corrupting the speaker, to speak without hurting, to understand others without demanding to be understood, to respect others without claiming consideration, to give our best in addition to performing our duties without charging fees of recognition. Lord, strengthen in us the patience towards the difficulties of others, just as we need the patience from others towards our difficulties. Help us above all to recognize that our highest happiness will invariably be the fulfilling of your plans wherever and however you want. Today, now, and always. So be it.